Shalom Chavrim, I'm Steve Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live here on Patreon, and we're going to go a little bit different. We were going to talk about freedom of speech here today, but so much is happening in regards to the situation that I shared on Israeli News Live in our live broadcast yesterday about these prophecies from Egypt. Where God has clearly showed that the Egyptians, that there's going to be a saving grace for the Egyptians. And of course, Palestinians, according to some claims, more than half the Palestinians, this is by Hamas themselves, are saying that the Palestinians are actually Egyptians. And this brings into light how Israel has been treating the Egyptians to begin with in this regards here as far as the Palestinians. And you have to understand, I do believe in Israel's full right to be able to defend themselves, but I also realize as more and more evidence is coming out from Israelis themselves, it's not always a matter of defense, but rather a matter of a testing ground to use weapons. And in fact, even Russia has taken up that themselves inside of Syria as they have waged war against the jihadists that are trying to overthrow the country. They too have used their weapons as a testing ground inside of Syria. So it seems like every nation that's in the business of selling weapons likes to have a testing ground. Looks like the Palestinians are also paying the price just for that. I really encourage you to listen closely though, because we're going to be sharing with you directly from Israelis what their experiences are and the things that they have to share. This is the intro for a documentary, as we're going to open up here, by Yotam Feldman, an Israeli that lives in Tel Aviv, even as of now. You can actually purchase his documentary, watch it on Vimeo. I actually did watch the entire documentary. I'll share with you the intro that he has here, as, or I should say the trailer, as well as one other clip inside the film. It is very disturbing. But I'm going to share with you more Israelis and what they have to say as we begin to look at the prophetic impact that all this is having. Listen to this right here. For some reason it's not. There we go. Why is there such a demand? Why is there such a demand for, I think he said Israeli weapons. Let me back it up so you can, I want to read it so you know. Yeah, for Israeli weapons, he asked the question at a defense contractor show. If Israel sells weapons, they've been tested, tried out. Does this experience lead to economic growth? Can you see it? And it brings Israel billions of dollars. And that's the intro to Yotam Feldman's film there that he shows there. You know, guys, the thing is, I have always been very much pro the government in dealing with situations that are in the Palestinian territories, the West Bank, and of course Gaza. And because I am a survivor of a suicide bomber myself in Israel in 2004 near French Hill, so I know what it's like when Israel has to live under terror. But the more that I have done my investigative reporting over the years here, the more I've discovered how that Rome and the Vatican itself and others have been involved in inciting the violence on the Palestinian side in order to achieve an objective. And of course, at the end of the day, it's a New World Order objective. And of course, Israel is going to be the capital of the New World Order. Specifically, Rome itself will rule right from Jerusalem. And it's a Jesuit It is a Jesuit movement. Some, I've seen before debates that it's either a Jesuit movement or it is a Rothschild, Jewish, Zionist New World Order. I think they work hand in hand together. Who's caught in the middle? Israelis. Everyday Israelis. Many of them who are actually looking for the coming of the Mashiach, the coming of the Messiah. I want to share with you also another man, and this guy right here happens to be Iran Efrati. He is an Israeli who has lived in Israel, former IDF soldier, fought inside the West Bank, Gaza, etc. And he shares some of his own insights in this, I guess it was a radio broadcast, Scratching the Surface, July 9th, 2016. Is when it was published on this particular channel right here. I'd like for you to hear a little bit about what Iran has to say.
Then I'm getting into a very interesting story about how the Israeli government and the Israeli army was selling a new tear gas canister into the government of police, Singapore, the police and government of Singapore people. They're selling tear gas canister to fight their protest in their country. And during this time I'm looking and I'm saying, Israel is selling tear gas canister? So I'm going into the website of the Minister of Security in Israel, and I find out they're saying that Israel just concluded a deal with the Singapore government of selling the best tear gas canister ever produced and tried by the Israeli army. And it mentioned there a few lines later that this tear gas canister was proven to be the most deadliest ever. And I'm going back and I'm saying, wait, try the tear gas canister. Who would be agreed to be tried? And then I understand. They're trying the weapons every day. Not in labs, down there on the field. They're trying their weapons. I was trying their weapons in Bil'in, in Yalin, in Kfar Kadum, in Abi Salah, in Bethlehem, in Hebron. Al-Halil, South Marchevon, in East Jerusalem. We're trying the weapons every day and then we're selling it outside. And I couldn't believe the things that I'm seeing, so I'm going deeper and deeper. And then I realized that, you remember this guy, the young guys that threw stones in the beginning of the protest? They were not Palestinians. They were actually an undercover unit of the Israeli army, looking like me, Arab Jews, disguising as Palestinians inside these villages, starting a riot, starting something, so the Israeli army will have a good excuse to start shooting the place up and testing the weapons. And the more I go, the more I can understand, is this for real? How long is it going through? How much money are we making? And I'm going in, and then I discovered in the last 40 years, and this is a very, very partial list, this is the dictatorships and regime that the Israeli government and the Israeli army is trading weapons with, trading knowledge with, trading technology, or training their soldier.
Now, I know Iran speaks very rapidly there, but as he mentions here, the dictatorships that are actually doing business with Israel, which is Panama, Nigeria, Chile, Romania, Ethiopia, Argentina, Zaire, Burma, South Africa, Colombia, and China. All these countries are doing big business with Israel, including Brazil, which is not mentioned on this particular list right here. I'll include Mr. Efrati's interview here for you on actually in our comment section below there, so that you can see some of this for yourself. But as I stated there, you know, for me, it's become more of a, you know, where have we lost our values at as believers in Yeshua? We have been standing with the government of Israel, forgetting about the everyday Israeli. You know, and I realize Israel does face dangers. There's no doubt about it. From the beginning of the inception of the country, we faced dangers. But you have to go back, if you study the history of how our country began, you would also find out that there were many of the leaders that were determined to drive every Arab out of the land. So there's been a lot of evil that has gone on. And many of the good Jewish people that I know personally that began to see this in the beginning, even the Bielski family, Tuvia Bielski left the country and went to America because he said he will not be any part of a government that is willing to kill their own people for an initiative. That's why I know firsthand, and I've been disclosing these things with you guys for a long time. But more and more, I'm beginning to realize it's getting worse. Worse, okay? Now, Al Jazeera published an article here, and the thing is everyone in the article that it speaks of are all either Israelis or Jews. And in the case here, Jeff Halper, as well as Neev Gordon. Jeff Halper, by the way, this is Jeff right here. Jeff is actually, he's more of a humanitarian, and he has been working on trying to rebuild the homes that are demolished by the Israeli government. Because not in every case are the homes that are being demolished, it's the families themselves, families that don't even realize maybe that their child was involved in some kind of terror attack, but yet their home gets destroyed as a result. You know, forget punishing the guy that does the evil, instead punish the entire family. Where's the justice in this? Do you realize also that in Israel, if you're an Israeli citizen, you cannot be tried as an adult until you're 18 years of age. But if you're a Palestinian, you're allowed to be tried as an adult from as young as 12 years old. I thought it was a democracy. You know, very troubling the things that are going on. Anyway, in this article right here, Neev Gordon, a politics professor at Ben Gurion University, said, you only have to read the brochures published by the arms industry in Israel. It's all in there. What they are selling is Israel's experience and expertise gained from the occupation and its conflicts with its neighbors. Now, that's ironic in itself that Israel in their brochures are calling Palestinians, whether they be in Gaza or the West Bank, their neighbors. Another analyst, Jeff Halper, who is writing a book on Israel's role in the international homeland security industry, has gone further. He argues that Israel's success at selling its know-how to powerful states means it has grown ever more averse to returning the occupied territories to the Palestinians in a peace agreement. The occupied territories are crucial as a laboratory, not just in terms of Israel's international security, but because they allowed Israel to become pivotal to a global homeland security industry. Other states needs Israel's expertise, and that ensures its place at the table with the big players. It gives Israel international influence way out of keeping with its size. In turn, hegemonic states exert no real pressure on Israel to give up occupied territories because of their mutuality reinforcing interest. That's an interesting way of putting it, isn't it? That's Jeff Halper, by the way, the man right here you see here that wrote the book, and they say he was writing the book. He's already written the book now, so you can get his book. All right. Then we have other articles like this one here, The Cruel Experiments of Israel's Arms Industry. It says here, round the back Ramallah's main hospital lies house of Iyad Haddad, a 50-year-old human rights investigator. His home office is the shop front of a decrepit building, and at first glance it looks like a brick and brack shop, but the objects placed out on the tables are not household trinkets. The surfaces are in fact cluttered with spent ammunition, tear gas canisters, sponge bullets, and shell casings. Haddad has spent the past 3 decades documenting the violence of the Israeli forces occupying his people's land. These ugly little pieces of memorabilia are his testament to that process. Many of these weapons have been fired on peaceful demonstrations protesting against Israel's wall settlements in the occupied West Bank. The villages Nalim, Belin, Nadi Salih have been organizing regular protests for years. To my surprise, Haddad does not approve of those demonstrations. Sometimes they are using us so they can know how to use each kind of weapon, he said. For me, these kinds of activities by the Palestinians become helpful to the Israelis because it makes this area into a laboratory to test their weapons, to develop them, and to make it a commercial industry in order to sell them to other countries. This is why I say, you know, you don't understand. Even the Palestinians, you guys are just becoming pawns in a game. And it's big business. If you watch The Lab, if you watch the documentary, the men that are successful in selling the weapons, they could care less about the Palestinian people. They have gloated in the fact of the multi-billion-dollar sales of these weapons. And the fact that they can say to the rest of the world, they are tried and tested. You know, when I say these things, friends, I have to ask the question to my brothers and sisters, where have we gone with what Jesus taught here in Matthew, for example, chapter 19, thou shalt do no murder, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, honor thy father, thy mother, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. In the video I did the other day, the man that comes and asks Jesus about this, wanting to have eternal life, and he says he knew all of this. And of course, when he's quoted, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, Jesus said, thou doest well. And the man makes the statement back to Jesus, but who is my neighbor? And Jesus gave him a beautiful scenario about the man that had went from Jerusalem down to Jericho, fell among thieves and was robbed and lay naked and injured on the road. And yeah, he shows how a Levite goes by, does nothing about it. A priest goes by, does nothing about it. But the Samaritan, who is he's not full-blooded Jew, but he goes by, sees the man, helps the man, covers up his wounds, takes him to an inn, pays the keeper to take care of the guy. And he says, if there's anything more to this guy, I'll pay for it when I come back. He says, now which one was the true neighbor? And of course the guy says the Samaritan was. In other words, the neighbor is not just another Israeli. The neighbor could be half Jewish. As they say even about the Palestinians, many of them actually have Jewish DNA inside of them. And yet at the same time, they are also known to be Egyptians, according to one Hamas leader that said this directly. He said their names, Al-Masri, meaning that they are Egyptian descent. And he said half of them are Egyptian, which is a proven fact from when they were making Israel as a nation before they allowed the Jews to come there during the Second World War. They were encouraging Egyptian and Jordanian presence inside of the state of Israel, which had not been formed yet, but had been mandated by the British resolution back in 1921 by the League of Nations. All right. Now, then we also have two where Jesus says, you have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and the unjust. For if you love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? If you salute your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the publicans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. Which is loving your neighbor. When he shows you to be perfect like your Father which is in heaven, our Father in heaven, he gives rain and he doesn't single out, oh, sorry, you're a Palestinian, you get no rain. You know, if they are Egyptian to begin with by birth and everything, what about the prophecy that Moses made in Deuteronomy? You know, because someone had made a comment to me in the comment section recently that, Steve, you know, I can't believe you're doing the way you're doing. You're becoming an anti-Semite. You need to really study your Torah. You know, all right. I've spent my life studying the Torah. And here's one example right here. Thou shalt not abhor an Edomite, for he is thy brother. That's why I don't hate the Catholic people. I don't even hate Pope Francis. I have pity for the man because he is an Italian and he's leading for a one world religion right inside Jerusalem, with that being the headquarters, and he also took over Mount Zion. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean every Catholic is an Edomite either, just because they're part of the Catholic Church. An Edomite is a Roman, because we know their descendants live in Rome, according to Obadiah's prophecy in chapter 1, where he says, they will drink upon my holy mountain. And then, of course, he says, and all the nations shall do the same. He says, thou shalt not abhor an Egyptian. If we're not to abhor Egyptians, and we know that half the Palestinians in Gaza are Egyptians, then why do we hate them? Because thou wast a stranger in his land. The children of the third generation that are born unto them may enter into the assembly of the Lord. I can't help but wonder if that even though we know it could be it's a third generation naturally, which would be 120 years, or if it was in the case of a generation during the time of Moses, well, I think that's every 70 years. But nonetheless, we may also look at that being at the time of the third temple. Now, that doesn't mean that they will enter into the third temple itself, because we are truly the temple of God Almighty. But what I look at is when at the time of the building of the third temple, that this could be a symbolic gesture of that third generation. The first and second temple, we didn't have the Egyptians there. But at the time in the very last days, then we could possibly see the Egyptians coming to know Yeshua as their Messiah. And did you know there's a lot of Palestinians that are actually believing Yeshua to be the Messiah now? Look at Isaiah 19. Everything about Isaiah 19. The burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud, and cometh into Egypt. And the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt within. I will spur Egypt against Egypt, and they shall fight every one against his brother, every against his neighbor, city against city, kingdom against kingdom. Does that not ring a bell right there when Jesus said in the last days, Matthew 24, that there should be wars and rumors of wars, nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom? It's a civil war. I didn't even realize Jesus was talking about a civil war when he said it. I thought it would be like the Egyptians against the Saudis, or the Saudis against the Iranians, or something like that, you know? No. He's talking about the Egyptians. When Morsi was elected to be the president of Egypt, and he was a cruel man, hated Christians. I know, I get that. And the U.S. went in there and sponsored a military coup and toppled the man. There's your kingdom against kingdom. And the spirit of Egypt shall be made empty within it, and I will make void the counsel thereof, and they shall seek unto idols, and to whispers, and to ghosts, and to familiar spirits, and I will give over the Egyptians to the land of the cruel Lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, and saith the Lord of hosts. Then he goes in talking about the waters would fail, the river shall be drained dry and become foul, and the streams of Egypt shall be diminished and dried up. Is that not maybe as a possible result of the two witnesses when the Bible says they would close up the heavens that it rained not in the days of their prophecy? Think about that one. Then he goes on down. The princes of Zoan are utter fools. The wisest counselors of Pharaoh are senseless counsel. How can you say unto Pharaoh, I am the son of the wise, the son of the ancient kings? He's also showing you a time frame by saying that. The ancient kings were in the days of Moses. Wow. Then we get down around verse 14. The Lord hath mingled within her a spirit of dizziness, and they have caused Egypt to stagger in every work thereof, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit. Neither shall there be of Egypt any work which the head or the tail or the palm branch or rush may do. In that day shall Egypt be likened to women. It shall tremble and fear because of the shaking of the hand of the Lord of hosts. And the land, watch this, and the land of Judah shall become a terror unto Egypt. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily mean in the land of Egypt, but Judah, the house of Judah, in modern days has certainly become a terror to the Egyptian, whether he lives in Egypt or whether he lives in the West Bank or Gaza. And it shall be afraid because of the purpose of the Lord of hosts which he had purposed against it. In that day shall be 5 cities in the land of Egypt that speak the language of Canaan and swear to the Lord of hosts. One shall be called the city of destruction. In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a pillar at the border thereof to the Lord, and it shall be for a sign and for a witness in the Lord of hosts in the land of Egypt, for they shall cry unto the Lord because of the oppressors. Who is the oppressor? Judah. He will send them a Savior and a defender who will deliver them. And the Lord shall make himself known to Egypt, and the Egyptians shall know the Lord in that day. Yea, they shall worship with sacrifice and offering, and vow a vow unto the Lord, and shall perform it. And the Lord will smite Egypt, smiting and healing, and they shall return unto the Lord, and he will entreat of them, and he will heal them. In that day shall there be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria, and the Assyrians shall come into Egypt, and the Egyptians into Assyria. Isn't that interesting? And Egyptians shall worship with the Assyrians. What is that? That's telling you about the Silk Road. That's showing you a time frame. We're at the borderline of the two witnesses coming. We're at the borderline because the Silk Road Initiative and this New World Order will be the time frame in which something will happen that God will open the eyes of even the Egyptians. You don't think that the Gentile people don't see the two witnesses' ministry to begin with? Sure they do. We can prove that by the book of Revelation. When does the bride make herself ready? It's after the destruction of Esau. That's when, or the great whore of Babylon. When the whore of Babylon is destroyed, that is when we read in Revelation, I believe it's the 19th chapter, that the bride has made herself ready. When does that happen? Well, the whore of Babylon is destroyed at the death of the two witnesses. We find that out. Why? Because of Ezekiel 35. Ezekiel says there that when the whole earth rejoices, talking about Esau, which is Rome, which is the whore of Babylon, he says, when the whole earth rejoices, I will destroy you. And at the same time, God says, and I will make myself known unto them. Who? Israel. Jeez. The death of the two witnesses. So the Antichrist system and the two witnesses are simultaneously going on at the same time. And while that's happening, the bride is making herself ready. When? During the time of the ministry of the two witnesses. According to what the book of Revelation says. Think about it. All right? Now, as we see how that prophecy plays out, let's back up, look again at some other writings here. This is on the PulitzerCenter.org. I asked, Uzi Rubin, a founder of Arrow, an Israeli anti-ballistic missiles program, is now a researcher at the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies in Bar Ilan University near Tel Aviv. He defended the way Israel has marketed its weapons as a battle-proven. It is legitimate because the Vietnam War sold a lot of weapons, he said. War usually sells weapons, but this is not to say that Israel is seeking war in order to sell weapons. Barbara Opal Rome has spent a few decades covering Israel for Defense News, a trade magazine for arms manufacturers. She advocates that Israel should allocate greater resources into what she calls less than lethal technologies. In her view, the Israeli weapon industry should think beyond weapons such as tear gas and skunk water and already deploying in the West Bank. I'm talking about using electromagnetic spectrum or high-powered microwaves to get people dizzy, she said. I mean, this is actually insane. Keep practicing on the Palestinians. I want you to see, this is when I was watching the documentary. In closing, I want you to hear one last comment on this documentary. I'll read you the translation. It is in Hebrew, and I will read to you. I'll put it up big on the screen so you can see it. Can you say how much this business is worth is the first statement. This is the man right here in the center of your screen that Yotam is speaking with. I'm sorry, it's this man right here. My apology, different guy, I think. In terms of money, let's say. If you're asking about money, the business potential is tremendous. So tremendous, we can't estimate it. Every missile here costs like a Tel Aviv flat. It could also destroy one, right? Says Yotam back to him. We have hundreds of missiles to sell here. It's funny but true. It's relatively cheap. The business is growing by year. Now I want you to watch what his next comment is. This is probably the only decent guy out of the arms manufacturers that I saw that actually said something good in response to it. Of course, as he's saying, it's relatively cheap to build it. So it's not that much money to cost for them to build it, but they sell it for the cost of a condominium in Tel Aviv. Every time I come here, I say, wow, look how much people spend on killing each other. If they would invest some of it in improving our lives, can you imagine what we could achieve? There you go. You know, I think the man, even though he's involved in this industry, he realizes if you would just invest some of that money in improving people's lives, what you could achieve. I think that's an indirect statement towards these Palestinians. Do a little bit to improve their lives, and you wouldn't have to be over there target practicing. I know it's pretty cruel to say, but you know, I mean, the truth has got to be said. And that's not anti-Semitic. That's not the Israeli people. Although that is officials in the government that have turned weaponry and suffering of people into a testing ground, a proving ground for their weapons. I'm Steve Ben-Nun with Israeli News Live. Very troubling, friends. Very, very troubling. And it is troubling to see, especially in light of the fact that you have a prophecy laying right here in Isaiah that talks about the Egyptians' eyes will come open. And God says to Moses, remember, you were a stranger in their land. We have forgotten the beautiful words of Yeshua where he said, love your neighbor as yourself. I'm Steve Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Shalom. In a world of Ein Shalom.